everybody. We are back today with a three-way with Brandy of Brandy Borough Astrology and Mac of Mac Jagger Tarot. And we're honestly don't even really know how to start this or what the fuck to call this video, but we're going to be talking about how sometimes in our line of work, the work that we do in the metaphysical world and the spiritual world, that we are kind of treated like dirty secrets. People will hire us, and actually it's not even just being hired by people that can treat us this way. This can also happen in personal life too.
Yeah, no one wants to be the friend of the astrologer or the tarot reader.
Yeah, or they don't really know what to say about it or what to do with it. So it can come from a lot of different ways, right? This feeling of being a dirty secret. And this is something that I don't see a lot of people talk about that do the kind of work that we do. And I think and I know that y'all agree, that it's a worthwhile conversation to have.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. Yes.
Yeah. So in saying all of that, I'm not really sure exactly how to start this off. But we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the relationship that Joan Quigley had with the Reagans and the Reagan administration.
Probably the most like high profile example of this is like from, like the year that I was born, all this came to fruition. So it's interesting that this has been going on for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that, there's not necessarily a lot of proof of, say, politicians, government, people in power using people, in the metaphysical world or in the spiritual world. But I would bet money, and I am a gambling person, I would bet money that a bunch of them do. I would.
I know Hitler did.
There's not examples of it, but like from the bigger perspective, the broader perspective, there's massive examples of it. I mean, from a historical perspective, it's just really in modernity that's been considered taboo.
Yeah, Hitler used astrologers and then put them in concentration camps so no one else had access to them.
Yes.
And then this guy also kind of some similar ideas, in my opinion, being controversial right out the gate. But yeah, I don't like Reagan. Reagan baby, don't like him. I'm gonna say it. I'm just gonna say it to anybody.
I don't either. For a whole bunch of reasons. I think it's kind of funny that this person, this individual, had a lot of religious supporters. I'm sorry, I do think it's kind of
show you how much times have changed. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, but I think it goes to show you how much like culture has changed, or even like the evangelical right has changed since the late 1980s to now, and like the views that a lot of people hold on what's, considered appropriate and not appropriate. I think it is very interesting. But also, I think when people come back to this conversation specifically about Reagan, they always go back to like, oh, he's a Hollywood type. Like, and that is true. That is how they became acquainted, was through the social circles that were happening behind the scenes in Hollywood, which makes me also wonder, who else is using these services, which I know I have some pretty high profile clients. Like, obviously I can't say who, but I do have some. And so I know that like, I'm not the only practitioner who works with people that are, recognizable names, but to your point, they just don't always tell people who we are or that we exist.
Yes. And will outright deny having
some
anything.
People will. I think there are definitely some people that acknowledge that they do work with spiritual practitioners. Like, I know Megan Fox comes to mind as somebody who's like actually themselves very well versed in astrology and like speaks on it frequently. And it's interesting when that comes up in interviews, I feel like, because there's oftentimes conversations where you can tell people have no idea what she's talking about. And sometimes conversations where you can tell they kind of do know what she's talking about.
Yeah. 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 She is somebody who does seem to bring it up somewhat often anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a high profile clients. And then I think a lot of us, I don't know about you guys, but have like a base of religious clients too, who this kind of goes against their beliefs, but they're like, don't tell anyone, but they seek out the services.
I've definitely had
1000%.
I've had
I've worked with,
go ahead.
oh no, I've worked with, like, this was not something secretive. Like, this is something that this group of people was totally okay with. But I worked a party of ministers. Like, they were all ministers and they were all coming together for a social gathering, and they had me come and do readings for them. But they were like cool ass ministers.
That's interesting.
That's awesome.
And that's cool. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what were you saying, Ellie?
I don't remember. I'm not sure I remember it. It might come to me later. It's okay.
I've also done parties for government offices, like elected official offices. I have, I have clients that work in very, very, very high levels of government, as well as like C-suite members of, high ranking tech offices. But one of the things that I do publicly and is known about is I work with tech companies. I've consulted on a company called Notion that I personally work with. They had me come in and consult on making the product more intuitive. I also have been brought in by clients to discuss Mercury retrograde and explain what it is to groups of executives. I have also just been brought in to do readings for pretty much any major tech company you can think of, just for their people. And that is something that they like publicly do, at least the readings portion. So I do have like that reputation of somebody who, I was in Forbes magazine for doing this work. So I do think that brings like an air of legitimacy to it, which is probably why I get these gigs. But that's talking about the shame or like the weirdness about family stuff. Like, my family really couldn't say shit about that after that. Cause I would be like, hey, real quick thing, go to Forbes.com, type in your name. No, it was all weird, strange, fun. Okay, but go type in mine. That's interesting. There I am. So let's maybe just like, and after that, I mean, nobody really has shit to say anymore. So I kind of
I'm in Forbes. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like at that point, like, I've been doing this work for some time at that point, but now it's very interesting because the uptick in specifically straight men that I now work with after that designation occurred, it's like a lot of them will just tell me to my face, like, I've been wanting to do this for a while, but like, I just didn't know who to look for. And then I saw that and I'm like, okay, well, cool. Like, your money spends too, I guess. Like, I don't discriminate when it comes to most clients. I'll take on pretty much anybody, but as long as, within reason. But I do find that it's interesting how that has sort of shifted people's perception of me and my work, because I'm still very much the same person. It was just something that happened, but for whatever reason, it's made it look more legitimate to the eyes of people who might have scoffed at it before.
Sure. And that thing that you mentioned about, I've been interested in this or whatever, straight men, that is something that tends to, that like clients that come to me that are straight men, not all of them, but some of them will kind of the same sort of thing, like, this is something I've always been curious about, but not really sure about, doing. They always kind of preface it.
Yeah. They like to let you know they're a skeptic, but they didn't want to do it.
It's like, okay, well, you paid the same fee as everybody else, so cool. Like, I'm a skeptic too about a lot of things, but I'm not a skeptic about your money. So if you want to hire me, come on over.
No, I think a little skepticism is a little healthy. Personally, you don't want to subscribe 100% to anything. You want your own evidence, and yeah,
for sure. I don't think that any of us really wants clients that just follow our wisdom blindly and put that ahead of their own judgment. I feel like that's a really dangerous game to play.
100%.
It is. And yeah,
we're here to advise and guide, not play out your life, right?
Yeah.
100%. It's also not our jobs to make one believe, or which is also something else that people tend to, well, make me believe this. No, fucker, I'm not going to do that. It's not my fucking job. Like, I've been told that too. Well, how can you make me? I don't know, motherfucker. It's not my job.
you're the one who paid the fee. Like, I don't know what to tell you beyond that. But I do think that like I have a lot of friends because I think it's a little different in the tarot, which I do read tarot, like it's kind of my branding. I'm more like in the Akashic record space primarily in the work that I do, and I definitely am on the more higher end of things. But I have like friends that work like the market circuits and things like that, and I do feel like you have that sort of barrier there a lot more, where people are just like, it's almost like this parlor trick thing, and it's like, okay, well, that's fine, but like also I don't know. It's an odd, because like I think the thing that I come back to all the time is that like the best thing and the worst thing about specifically like the tarot industry is that there's no real regulations around what we do. And I think to some degree that's true with astrology too, although it feels like there's slightly more of a governing body with y'all, maybe not like an official one, but I don't know, the fact that you're working with numbers and the precision of it all feels so much more exact and so much more reliable. And I think like that's where things kind of like the gray area comes in, of like that there's, with specifically my realm, there's no way to verify any of this. It's completely just, I don't want to say conjecture, but it's completely just like the proof is in the pudding type thing. So I think that there's a little bit of a variance when it comes to astrology, because at least y'all have like this historical precedent of all this data that you're working off of that you can point to in terms of the ways in which you're making your theories. Or I don't know what y'all think about that, but that's the way I view it as someone who doesn't practice astrology professionally in the way that you do.
Yeah, there are themes to go off of, cycles, seeing something come around, looking at these different cycles. Okay, this happened during this cycle, this happened during this cycle. What are we looking at for this cycle, kind of thing.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think that is got a little bit more of I guess, an air of legitimacy if we're kind of talking about from that perspective. Not that I'm saying that what I do is not legitimate or that anything like that, but I think it is somewhat slightly different in terms of like the credibility aspect, in my opinion, of term and what astrology can sort of back itself up on, because like we said, like historically there's mountains and mountains of evidence that this has been in use for such a long time.
it's actually interesting. I'm gonna read this quote from somebody, a historian, Anne Geneva. She wrote, and this is kind of about like the history of the context of this is a history of astrology, kind of, and when it kind of broke away and started being seen as a pseudoscience instead of an actual science. In the astrology in the 17th century, England was not a science. It was not a religion. It was not magic, nor was it astronomy, mathematics, Puritanism, Neoplatonism, psychology, meteorology, alchemy, or witchcraft. It used some of these as tools. It held tenets in common with others, and some people were adept at several of these skills. But in the final analysis, it was only itself, a unique I can't ever pronounce this fucking word, divinatory, divinatory, and prognostic art embodying centuries of accredited methodology and tradition. So it kind of, it makes sense, because it is kind of what you're talking about with astrology, and it doesn't at all make what, tarot or anything else less valid, right? But there is astrology is kind of in an interesting place, because it does kind of utilize, it utilizes like the planets, which exist, right? Which are actually tangible things, versus other forms of divination that it is more from an intuitive place. Though I think astrology is very much from it, or I think intuition should be involved with astrology too, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
it does kind
I like
of
to combine them. Like
absolutely.
I'm a very big card reader, and it depends, it's all up to interpretation, but it depends on your relationship with the cards, the patterns you see, the track record, and you kind of build your own system. But yes, I think astrology has more of like, you can put your finger on it and see like the mathematics,
yes,
the more science of it, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, just use them together. I feel like you get the powerhouse sometimes. But I see
absolutely.
what you're saying.
Yeah, fully. I fully agree. I'm curious, do you consider, if you're just working with charts and you're not working at all with any other tools, do you consider that in your individual opinions to be divinatory?
I do. I mean, I kind of see it as both. I got the Gemini thing here where I kind of go both ways here, but like, I see it to me as like a science, but it's a very intuitive thing as well. Like when you can just kind of stare at a chart and get a energy about a person before you're actually diving into the details of planets and aspects and all.
Right, because like two people could have the same placement and be very much living different experiences of it for sure.
Oh,
So
like
that makes a lot of
twins,
sense.
yeah, they can take different octaves of the signs, different parts of the houses, signs. Yeah, definitely you can have similar charts, but be very different people.
Express those
Yeah.
planets.
And then that's, yeah, and I mean, like to some degree, I think someone can get very similar tarot readings and be very different people. I've had that throw me off before earlier in my career. I remember when I was like doing like high volume readings, so lots and lots of readings in a day. I had this reading with this guy. He was like demographically, he was from Asia, living in the Bay Area, working in tech. He was like probably in his late 20s, had this like very specific life and lifestyle. And then later on in the day, I did a reading for a housewife living in Boston. She was much older. She was American born, does not work in any major field like that. And they had such similar readings that it threw me off. Because I'm like, these are distinctly different humans in almost every different, like every measurable capacity, but they were almost like experiencing something really similar, and the tarot was really reflecting that back. And I was almost struggling with her reading to the point that she even asked me about it and like asked me like, are you stumbling on something? And I just told her honestly. And then I was like, I kind of shared a little bit about what I saw in his reading, and then she was like crying because it resonated with her so much. And I was like, well, that's strange, because these are two completely different human beings, and they didn't know each other. They were not involved in the same session, but it was very, very interesting to see that. So I think part of that probably is the astrology of like whatever was going on. I didn't see either of their birth charts, but whatever the planets were doing in that particular moment was causing these two very similar or very different people to have very similar emotions about something.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else y'all want to share about the dirty secret part before? Thoughts on it, feelings. I have lots
It's
of
tough, and I was on a podcast the other day. We kind of got into this, not meaning to, but things have come a long way. I think just a few years ago, I was a quote life coach, but now I can come out and be like, I'm an astrologer, tarot reader, spiritual coach, advisor, whatever. But things are opening up. People are getting more open to it. It's getting a little bit normalized. So hopefully we keep going in that direction. But it's tough, especially for like, us, we have small businesses. It's hard to get reviews, like public reviews. We can't talk about who our clients are. If we could, we'd probably get a little bit more legitimacy or credibility, if people saw what types of people we read for. Because it's not just the woo-woo. We read for business people. We read
like
you were well-known people, and
that's where I think my advantage also comes from, like having had such long experience on working with corporate teams. Is like those are I can tell you the corporate teams I've worked with. I can put that on my website, and I think that really does help like raise legitimacy with like a average person who's looking for someone to hire in this space. I also find that like the thing that I'm doing the most of this year that I've never done as much this in my life, my work history before, is so many weddings. The weddings are super big on hiring tarot readers now. It's like I have a wedding almost every weekend for the rest of wedding season because it's become so popular. And it's like such an interesting, and then that brings us down to the path of like, is it just because it's trendy right now? There's so many different avenues that conversation could probably branch off to that are not necessarily the most relevant for today. But I do think it's very interesting to like that trajectory of like the normalization, and then people coming into this industry that weren't around for the days when you couldn't be as public about it, and kind of that feeling of like, okay, well, I don't know. I mean, the more something normalizes, the more people are going to like jump on the bandwagon, of course, and that's just natural. But it's just an interesting cultural shift to be a witness to and to be a particular active part of.
The trending part or trendy part that you mentioned, it's one of those things that's both like a wonderful thing, but it also has its issues too. like people
pop astrology.
Fuck that shit.
Yeah.
I cannot. Seriously, I
Yes.
could go off on many tangents about how much I fucking hate that shit. How many idiots there are. How many idiots there are on Twitter and fucking wherever, TikTok and shit. I'm sorry. That
I've gotten
Yeah,
clients that way
right
though,
to be
because
angry.
they've been on TikTok and they're scared because they're like, oh
Yes.
my God, this
And I'm thinking, don't
person said
listen
this
to
is
that
gonna happen to me.
dumbass.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's like anything where, like you said, it's great and it's also terrible. But I think the great part is like eventually the serious people will find each other and then the bullshitters will find each other. And
Yeah.
like I think the people that have been in this industry before that boom are the ones who have the staying power to last, because like we had to work to get clients before there was this popularity, you know, like I think that there's something really authentic about people that have been doing this work for, you know, 5+ years or however long it's been since this trend became so prominent. But I think that there's something that I don't think that any of us need to be like particularly intimidated by that, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because it's like the proof is in the pudding, as I've said before.
Yeah, it does bother me though when I have clients come to me and they're like, I saw this, blah, 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 blah," and I'm like, please don't. Like, and I'm like, I understand. And I'm thinking to myself, who is this asshole that's running around saying something on?
Well,
Who is an
the
asshole?
problem is that it can cause like anxiety, it can cause
Yes.
major fear in people,
Yes.
or it can like, you know, I had one, I'm supposed to inherit a bunch of money this month, this TikTok, you know, I was like, you know, that
Yeah.
yeah. So it's, I don't
Care about our
know if it's like
clients.
intimidation. It's
Not intimidation, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't intimating that was the case. I'm just saying, you know, I guess broadly speaking to anyone who's watching this, like, I don't think that like, you know, I think there are certain people that are going to get a kind of ride the wave and get, you know, popularity or notoriety, and it'll turn out that they don't know what the fuck they're doing, and certain people that'll definitely like withstand. But yeah, I could see how that'd be incredibly fucking frustrating to experience someone trying to say to you, oh, I've been told I'm going to win the lottery this month. It's like, what do you even say to that?
I know, it's like, you know, yeah,
that
one's
you know,
tough.
yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, you know, especially the ones that are anxious or nervous or scared about something.
Yeah.
I really care about. I really, really, really care about my clients. Anybody that's watching this that's been a client of mine, I fucking care about y'all.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see.
And I've seen that with palm reading. I've seen it with palm. I used to be a palm reader. I don't do it anymore, but I had people like, oh, like literally living years of anxiety because they saw a palm reader. I don't know. I'm just throwing this out here, New Orleans or somewhere else. And they're like, they said I was going to die when I'm 50. Like, yeah, you care. You don't want people living in fear or like, and that's kind of the thing with an unregulated industry. You know, it's,
It is.
1000%.
It is. And it's yeah. And I think that's something else, you know, I think the lack of regulation perhaps, and even the pop shit can kind of also,
Yeah.
it ends up making it harder for the people that are serious about it, that take it seriously, to be seen as legitimate too. I think that you know, just kind, and I realize the people that are actually interested in it at a deeper level will we will find each other. But
For sure.
but it can, you know, it can be hard to swim through it, you know.
Right. 1000%. And it brings up also like internalized, I think, fear, or like generationally concentrated fear, like a witch wound within us, of like people not that long ago were absolutely persecuted for this work. And it, you know, there's also that historical element to like that can't really be ignored, how it's not always just been controversial. It's been to some degree dangerous for people to practice this work. And when you're messing with people's emotions like that, like not us, but like, these fraudulent practitioners out there, you never know what that could cause someone to do, down the line. So I do think that
I've seen it. And that might be a whole other episode, but
ethics,
being around other practitioners, I've seen them project, I think, very negligent, abusive things, convincing people certain things have happened to them. And it's scary. It is so scary. So you got to be careful about who you see, and
yes,
always go with your intuition on these things. But yeah.
And practicing discernment is always important. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I try to take the approach of first do no harm. Like really, like whatever,
Right.
whatever the situation might be, whatever they're coming to me for, somebody's coming to me for, that is really the way that I try to approach it always. I'm not
Agreed.
That's what I try to do.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it takes a lot of bravery to step into this role, and that's where I get fearful of people sort of doing it willy-nilly, whether it's on the internet or if there's currency exchange, or like, there's a lot to be said, I think, in terms of the roadmap that's being laid out right now. But I think that's like you said, maybe a different conversation. But I do think it's very interesting to think about the pop astrology of it all and the perspective around that, and how something like the Joan Quigley situation that we've kind of hinted at is interesting, because primarily, from my understanding, what she was doing for the Reagans was electional astrology. And I don't even know that the majority of the public even understands, what that actually is or what that entails, And I think people there's so many misconceptions around astrology in specific, because there's so many different forms of astrology that y'all can practice, and it's so much more than just like personality archetypes. And I think people really lose that when they distill it down to just the pop astrology of it all.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have one thing to say about like the sort of team element of it. So like I mentioned previously, the corporate team called me last Mercury retrograde, and they were very serious. They paid me a very large sum of money to sit down and really explain to them what Mercury retrograde works and how it impacts them and how they can work with it. And I taught a little masterclass on it, and they were very shit gets fucked up and we don't know how to handle it and we need some help. And they were dead. They were not playing. They were like, we need to have some sort of education on this. And I was like, I got you. I can explain planetary retrogrades, specifically why Mercury is difficult to deal with. And I just like kind of gave them like the bare basics of it, and kind of taught a little masterclass on how to work with it, because I have so many Mercury ruled planets in my chart. I'm like, I got you. And it was very refreshing that they were like taking it very seriously, because it started as a joke, and then they realized, not a joke, this is actually a real phenomenon that they're feeling stressed about. And I was able to like demystify it and make it less stressful and teach them their ways to work with it. And I thought that was really fascinating cultural shift around like what started as silly haha memes, jokes, has actually become something that people are like, okay, there's something legitimate here that we need to kind of suss out and understand.
Yeah, absolutely. That had to be a very cool experience, but it was
fun. I already had a master class that I had taught before, so I was able to just like repurpose something. So I was just like, I got you. And it was fun. And I also feel like I'm helping people. I'm like, this is not something you need to be afraid of. This is something you can work with. This is something that can be your ally. But you have to get rid of the pop astrology association that this is a bad thing, or else it will be a bad thing. Because when you create that association, then it becomes perception is reality. And I think that's true for like a multitude of things in life. But I think coming back to like what we're talking about, like the bad birth chart or something like that, which is
say that one more time.
kind of coming back to, I think a lot of people are bad birth chart, or like there's something wrong with them because they're just,
saying, yeah, she was saying like some people think they have like a bad birth chart, like they're screwed in life, and it's not like that. There's always the strengths and ways to use the energy.
Yeah, perception
just,
becomes reality, and when you're like influencing that.
I just think it's interesting. Just talking about Mercury retrograde made your screen glitch out.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Because you kind of froze. That's why I was like, huh? That's why I was making that face.
Okay, I won't say those words again. No more discussion.
The energy from the words are powerful.
It's like, hello, I'm here.
Shadow period.
No, my shadow's here. What's up? Well,
am I coming through clearly now, or is it still glitching?
You seem good now. You seem good.
Okay, sorry about that. My internet connection's a little.
Yeah, that's not any. And that ain't you. That's the thing. That's the thing. No, the ethics though of like what you were talking about the kind, and I realize we can't get into a big ass conversation about ethics, but that is something with Quigley, right?
That was my question. Like when we're talking about the book that Mac is showing, I was like, did she get permission to talk about this? Because like to me, I felt like there was a weirdness, like revealing how you worked with your clients and what you did for them without, there should be confidentiality, right?
Yeah, or at least, if there's not actual, I mean, I also wonder, with her working with with who she was working with, did she have to sign any
like
agreements?
NDAs?
Yeah.
No, like I would assume if she did, this wouldn't have been possible. It seems odd, but I've never heard any discussion of it in any conversations I've heard about her.
I haven't either.
I mean, we don't have the laws, right? We're not like doctors or, but there's just that ethics. But yeah, I would have thought they would have had her sign
something
like a non-disclosure.
Have either of you been ever asked to sign an NDA from a client?
I have not.
I'm actually.
I put out there though that it's private and that I won't. I give permission if I discuss any stories or anything publicly.
I've had a couple
1,000%.
Kind of surprised didn't ask me to, but maybe it's because
same now in retrospect.
But I'm but I guess they know I'm not. Other than to mention it like this, I'm not talking. So maybe that's
right. For sure, absolutely. Same.
I had one higher profile client in the music industry. She said I could talk about it as long as I didn't talk about like the negatives of it was like a synastry thing. And I honored it. So I think it is a little bit of an honor system, but you build that reputation with people.
Right. It's your own reputation too, that you're like, you don't want to get the reputation as someone who's going around talking. I think in this particular situation, her name was already very much out there. Her career was probably already to some degree in jeopardy because of this. So it might have been a defensive mechanism. And like, we know that there was her name was mentioned first by Don Reagan. And then I believe that Nancy also, like you said, had written a book that may or may not have mentioned her. So at this point, I think she might've just been doing some damage control. Yeah. I also don't necessarily know that I agree with Joan Quigley's ethics in a lot of things. I mean, personally, but I think it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm wondering if perhaps even if she did have to sign something, right? I'm wondering if homeboy in the Reagan administration that wrote his little book, I wonder if by him doing that, it perhaps
opened that door. Like it's already.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how that all works, but I wonder if perhaps him doing that, bringing up, because like in his book, what was his name again?
Don Reagan.
Don Reagan. Okay, I'm thinking of homeboy and
Ron Reagan.
There's Ron Reagan, and then there's Don Reagan, and then there's Dixon who used Dixon because he used astrologers too. Yeah, so yeah, the names are all matchy match.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna try. I'm just gonna think of him as homeboy. Whatever. But yeah, I was it is an interesting. I would be curious about that. The not that I'm a lawyer, but the legal aspects of all of that. And maybe if that's what allowed her to.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I know, there's never been any conversation of like litigation that occurred. I think by the time all of this occurred to, they were probably dealing with bigger fish to fry in terms of like Ronald Reagan's dementia and all the things that were going on with them personally, they probably just didn't care anymore. This came out in 1990. The presidency was over. Bush had won. I think they were probably just like, we did what we set out to do. Who cares at this point? I also think it was a different world, Reagan was asked to comment on all of this, and he didn't even disavow astrology. He was basically just like, I don't know what I don't know, and it was such a different world. I mean, we think of Reagan right now as this sort of evil caricature of this demon, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think that he was a shitty person, but I think if you look at the way that American politics operates now and the way American politics operates then, it was a totally different beast.
There is a similar nature though between fucker that wants to run or wants to win again and Reagan. There is a similar almost cult of personality thing surrounding these two assholes.
I think this is the entertainment industry background. It's probably
people who love Reagan, and people who love this other guy they're of course it seems a little more intense now than what I remember Reagan's following.
But I'm wondering if it would have felt as intense back then if we had had social media, the 24-hour news cycle, right? We have all that now that's in our face constantly. Right. I wonder if, because I don't know. I mean, the times are very different, but those two fuckers, there's a similarity. And really, I mean, they both push conservative policies, right? But I don't really think of either of them as conservatives. They're just jumping on a fucking bandwagon.
1000%. They're Hollywood. They're Hollywood types. They're show people, actors. I mean, I know Trump's never been a true actor, but I mean, certainly a performer. I do think also it's something interesting that is somewhat acknowledged, and I don't know this person's specific role, but I know Trump has a spiritual advisor. She's a real kooky looking weirdo. I don't think there's any sort of specific modalities that is used, but I would not be surprised. I mean, if Trump himself has people that look at these things for him. I mean, I personally think I think Reagan just got caught, or maybe was the most reliant upon it of the high profile modern presidents. But I think that he was probably just the one who someone snitched on versus it being, something that it doesn't happen somewhat normally behind the scenes.
Yeah, I would bet that it happens a lot.
Especially somebody like Trump who doesn't have a true ideology. Trump's obviously not truly.
He's a Gemini.
Christian,
He can't land on one thing, and he'll use whoever can, he'll use the evangelistic people. See, that's a word I can't say. The evangelist, right? And he's not buying into that shit. He's just gonna use
He's
whoever
gonna have those people suck him off because they treat him like they're he's a savior to them, and he likes that.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy and bizarre. And I don't, as much as people now have this idolization of Reagan, I don't think that people were like that as much then. I mean, I was a baby. I was born when Reagan was towards the end of his presidency. But to hear people talk about it, I don't feel like people had the same sort of idols. I don't think people were walking around wearing Reagan hats and shit. I mean, maybe they would be now, but I think
I've seen them now. There has been a resurgence of the Reagan, the 84
Reagan.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
Reagan, the Reagan Bush.
Christ.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it too,
I have no word.
It wasn't, I don't know. I feel I guess my point is I do feel like Reagan has become this caricature of who he actually was. And I think part of that is maybe arguably the efficacy of his policies. His policies have stuck very, very, very well in the milieu of my own. I sometimes wonder if it was because of the electional, the electional astrology used to cast charts to put these things in action to, important legislative events happening on really friendly transits. I wonder if there is some sort of connection there to the reason that these policies have had such staying power. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it's just something I think is worth exploring.
I think that's absolutely possible. Yeah, because I mean, people come to me at weddings are a thing that people
Yeah.
want me for, when to get married. And I mean,
That's what they should.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, if I were to ever get married again, I would absolutely be timing that shit out, right? If that was at 3 a.m, so be it. Kind of thing. But yeah, you set yourself up with a good electional chart for whatever you're wanting to do. Yeah.
Well, and there was this controversy about Reagan being sworn in his initial inauguration at like shortly after midnight. And it was like a specific time, it was like 12:06 a.m. And he made up some sort of story about, oh, that's when the football game I'll be watching is over. But it was because of Joan Quigley saying that that was the most ideal time for him to take the oath of office.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is,
this book has actually several of the electional charts that she used for specific events, which I think is quite interesting from just an analysis perspective of like, she lays it out like, this is how I charted like specific conversations, specific visits, specific flights, specific health procedures. Like that's pretty much what the content of the book is just the electional charts and how she came to create them.
Now from a video I watched, Nancy kind of vetted her and asked, could you have predicted the assassination attempt on my husband? Now, I found that interesting because I don't know if this is confirmed, but it's a well-known story that even John Lennon and Yoko Ono used astrologers, and that an astrologer predicted his assassination on an island. But like, hearing that part, like, to me, that's weird because I would never tell a client I could predict a death or an assassination. I might be able to predict a challenging time period.
Right. No, it's clear emotional manipulation, I think.
I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I think it was clear.
In this context, for sure. Because it's like, I don't, there's something about asking like that in retrospect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I could have solved that. I mean, we see, I don't know about you guys, like you can see an astrology chart and sometimes see where there could be I always say potential because we don't know for sure. There could be a potential health event or, changes in health that could be good or bad. But to say, yeah, I could have predicted your husband was going to be shot at this day at this time, I don't know about that.
But to counter that, I do think to some degree, this is the cover-up story that the White House used to say why. So it does kind of feel like the chicken or the egg of like, is that the conversation they really had, or was that the agreed upon conversation that they said they had to justify why it was even happening? Because I think that there's some theories that that's the cover story of like, well, we only did this because we were so freaked out. And that's why we took these drastic measures. And that's like Reagan himself even put that story into motion of like, oh, it was just something my wife did because she was afraid and I just went along with it. That was basically his cover story.
I see. That would make sense.
Yeah. So
I don't know that it might have, I would not put it past this woman to have said something like that though, to be fair, based on what I know about her.
I kind of wouldn't either. So it really could be either or.
Could be a true story. I mean, they could be using it as a cover story and it could also be true.
Yeah, it could be. It's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's weird history as I watched a video about it yesterday, which was a video that was talking about a very interesting video. It was talking about a lot of the facts, derived from this book and other known information about it. But it was a very skeptical video, kind of mocking astrology, multiple points, which, is a kind of a common status quo viewpoint. But it ended with the question of like, should presidents be allowed to consult with astrologers? And I think that's a really fascinating question to ponder, because my initial assumption was like, hell yes, in fact they should be required to, and then I was like, yeah, but then also what happens when a president I deeply disagree with does it and then causes the country to go to shit? So it's a double-edged sword, in my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think it's an interesting conundrum to look at.
That's tough because, you know, we like astrology, like I'll use it for my husband when he's looking for job opportunities. And I think that's a natural thing, right? But yeah, when you're in a position that affects millions of people, that's a good question.
Well, I think it comes back to just like anything. It's a tool. A hammer can be used to create or destruct. You know, it depends on the person in power and who's using it. I do think that theoretically, it makes sense to me to use whatever tools are at our disposal to create the most efficacy possible, especially when we're dealing with like very sensitive matters that are potentially, you know, beneficial to a lot of people. I think at the end of the day, it just matters again, probably who we elect and why, and the integrity of that person, any tool they have, whether it's a nuclear weapon code or a birth chart. You know what I mean?
It kind of makes me want to know, okay, are these, you know, with the help of this astrologer, did it create all these things that Reagan created and affected so many people? Or was there certain transits going on to the US's chart as well? Do you know if she ever used the USA's chart?
That's a good question.
I don't know. Because there's also all the disputes of like which chart she would have used, because there's so many different theories on like which chart is the valid chart. So I don't know. That's a good question.
US
One would assume she would factor in a lot of data, but I don't know. Sorry.
Oh, there would have been a Pluto square going on in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
To natal Pluto. I have the dates written down in one of my mini books, but that would have been yes, it would have been going on.
It would have been in Scorpio by then.
It went. I'm thinking about it when I was at the very beginning of Scorpio, very end of Libra, right?
Yeah, I kind of went into that ingress. Yeah, and so it went trining by
Pluto
sign.
Scorpio, and I was born in 87. So sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
No, I think it was like, I think the square, if I remember correctly from my notes, the exact square might have been in like 82 or 83. Maybe. Yeah. Yes. Because I have a client born in 82 that I'm thinking of right now. Pluto is
a square or a trine, because a square, it would have had to been what, 27 degrees Scorpio. I know I was born in 79. I know my Pluto's like 16, 17 degrees Libra.
Yeah, this is no, the square between Libra and the Capricorn Pluto.
Oh, Libra. I don't know why I'm thinking Aquarius. I'm in today's astrology. Rewind. Shitty astrologer moment.
That happens. It happens.
But wait, but the US is
at 27 Capricorn.
Okay. And so the Libra, it would have been 27 degrees Libra around 82, 83. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
And I'm thinking to myself, I have a client that was born in 80 that I'm thinking I have other clients born in 82, but this one I'm thinking of specifically, their Pluto's like at I think at like 26 degrees.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So, I'm like into like today's Pluto return astrology of the US. So I'm getting mixed. I'm with you now.
But yeah, so
I would have to assume. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say we were going through that off the top of my head. We were.
Yeah.
I would have to assume she used all the data at hand, because I know that she somehow got access to Gorbachev's chart, and that is a big part of this book. And the synastry between Reagan and Gorbachev is something that she frequently considered in her, in the advice she gave. But yeah, I don't know that there's been much documentation of her specifically using the United States birth chart, but why wouldn't she? I mean, it seems like she would have to want to consider that.
I would imagine. I would think so.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly think it's a part of history that people definitely want to sweep under the rug, and I understand why, but I think it is something that is really fascinating. And I wanted to, because on page 13 of this book, she comes right in heavy with she doesn't mention it by name, but she comes right in heavy with the Tecumseh's curse, the theory that on years that end in 0, presidents die. And she says right here, Ronald Reagan is the first president elected in a 0 year to survive his term of office since William Henry Harrison died a month after office, and a month after a month in office on April 4th, 1980. 1841. I'm sorry, 1841. And it's true, after Reagan survived his assassination attempt, Bush allegedly survived an assassination attempt, which I thought was the shoe, but it was actually yeah, but that video said it was actually a grenade. But then that leaves us with, you know, our current sitting president. So who's, you know, allegedly still alive, but I'm still curious on the data around on the proof of that. It's giving a little bit of a Weekend at Bernie situation, in my humble opinion.
Weekend at Bernie's.
So how many of those, I'm trying to think of those deaths that happen on an election year that ends in 0. Some were assassinations or attempts here, but I know like Harrison
had
his inauguration out in the cold rain, like all day. And I'm trying, so it's like, back in the day, if you did that, there were like health consequences for it. But yeah, it'd be interesting.
Fact, I used to park my car in the building where that happened when I lived in Indianapolis, and I worked in like a terrible tech job. My parking pass was in the Harrison house where
that is a fun fact.
But yeah, that was obviously, I think it's like him through Kennedy. Obviously we know what happened to Kennedy. I think it was probably more just deaths out of, so how many presidents were actually assassinated? Not that many,
3,
right?
I believe. I think it was Kennedy, Cleveland, and McKinley, I think.
That sounds about right.
I'm not a history scholar, but I think there's been 3.
I think you're right. I don't know. I mean, I think the Tecumseh's curse idea is interesting. I don't know that it is, you know, something that I necessarily buy into. Of course, like I said, she didn't actually name it that, but she did come right out the gate with saying that was sort of the basis of her employment or her contract work with these people. So they must have had some sort of, I mean, I guess anytime you're surviving an assassination attempt, you're going to be kind of probably a little bit more spooky about it. But I think it is an interesting part of history that it's like, you know, weird, one of those just weird, almost too coincidental things, like the Lincoln and Kennedy connection, you know, how they had all these different people working for them and different names. I don't know the whole limerick of it all, but just it's weird history, I guess, to my
weird history.
My best. Yeah, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is very interesting. It is.
Also stands to reason that.
Oh, sorry. I was just kind of going off in my little Gemini side thought. So wasn't the assassination attempt kind of had to do with Jodie Foster, right? Didn't the guy try to do it to get her attention? I wonder how Reagan and Jodie Foster's charts line. Side
note.
I would
love to see that. I also find it hilarious that Jodie Foster recently came out and said, it did kind of impress me. I was like, I knew I liked you, Jodie. That's the way to get to my heart, too. I'd be like, you know what?
I guess I got her attention.
What a guy.
Yeah. That's funny.
But yeah, I was obviously a completely unhinged, just like thing to do, and it probably had very little to actually do with Reagan's politics and more of just like, again, those days were weird. I mean, like you could have much more easy access, I think, to public figures than you can today.
It was 4 months after John Lennon assassinated, and I know that got the attention of the media, and that's what this guy was seeing too. And so there's a lot of different things kind of intertwined in that story, but yeah, crazy time.
Yeah, I mean, I think like to your point about like the Harrison death, I mean, like, you know, the presidency used to be a lot more casual. It used to be a lot more, you know, it's still a lot, I guess we just live in a completely different world. But I think that there's something so interesting about the resurgence of astrology now, when it has this like huge historical footprint in so many different aspects of like our modern world, and like so much of our origins, even like the days of the week, are named after, you know, the planets. And it feels so interesting that people want to, or so quickly dismiss that, when it's like, aren't you curious about that a little bit? Like I find that people really like pop astrology or are drawn to it, I think, because it is so simplistic and they don't want to necessarily dig into the all the nooks and crannies of it. But it's like so deeply ingrained into our psyches that I think people don't even really think about how pervasive it actually is.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of all around us. You know, whether we realize it or not.
Which I think why is also so frustrating, I think, to then just distill it down to like Geminis are chatty and Scorpios are secretive, and
They kind of are.
yeah, I mean, for sure.
I also think some people use that kind of astrology. They use it for a couple of reasons. One, to validate or even excuse things about themselves. And I think they also do it because they don't to validate or something with something they don't like about somebody else.
Yeah.
Yes, it's petty. It's used for pettiness a lot of the time.
Petty shit.
And
I admit
feel
I'm
like
guilty of that.
some-
Okay. Damn, Scorpio.
For
No,
sure.
I'm
I
kidding.
mean,
I say it as in fun, but no, I think some people seriously do though.
Yeah, they do.
well, I don't know. Okay, this is a real side tangent, and you may or may not have this frame of reference, but are you familiar with Jennifer Lopez's new like weird little side project she put out called This Is Me Now? It's an
I've heard
astrology.
of it. I don't know what it is though.
It's
I've heard the title.
worth a watch just out of the sheer like horror of it all, but it is she's very a pop astrology girly, and so she has all of these different pop culture figures representing the different signs, but like some of them are not even like she has Kiki Palmer representing, I think, Scorpio. Kiki Palmer is definitely a Virgo sun, like real weird associations.
Oh,
And
okay.
very like just like how she personally feels about certain sun signs, but have actually no real, even like the actual stereotypes associated with the sun signs are not represented. Like she's like brutally beaten by a Libra, and like it's like, I hate Libras, and it's like, what? Girl, what?
She needs to stick to skincare. I gotta say, her skincare line is amazing, but like, just stick to that.
Yeah, she delved into astrology, and the results are pretty horrifying.
Oh my God,
I didn't even, I had no idea.
No, I want to watch this.
It's bad, but it's also really fun.
Oh boy.
But she also, I have heard, has a real prejudice against Virgos, and it's like, all right, girl.
Really? So she doesn't like Virgos, doesn't like Libras. Who does she like?
Ben Affleck, Leos. They are both Leos.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. But I believe she has Venus in Virgo, because I think I looked that up because
that checks.
Yeah,
that checks. As a fellow Venus and Virgo, I can understand that. But yeah, her that is worth a watch, because it is like the bastardization of pop astrology to like the billionth degree, and it's really just cringy because it doesn't even, I don't think she talked to an actual astrologer once. I think she was just like, this is what I believe off of this very, very, very anecdotal data of like one person I met once.
oh boy.
I feel like that's something that would both make me laugh and piss me off at the same time.
Oh
yeah, like could you finish it, Ellie? If you turned it on, would you get to the end?
Would I get to the end, or would I end up throwing the remote going, motherfucker? Because it really might happen.
I'll be getting blown up with messages from Ellie. Are you watching this shit?
What is this bullshit?
It is so god awful that it keeps like every time you think you're out, it pulls you back in with like some sort of, no, it's like a video album.
Oh,
it's like a one really long music video. Thumbs up.
That's Ellie going, hey.
That stupid fucking thing. I can't get it to not do that. Okay, sorry.
It happens all the time. I see it on other people's Zooms too. I don't know. It's not just you. It must be some sort of
It's not
Zoom
just
thing,
you. I had it happen to a client. She's like, why are you doing that to me? And I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's something on your side. Like, she thought.
Yeah, it happens. I don't know why. Zoom, you need to fix that. Well, this was such a fun chat. I really enjoyed being invited to talk with you all. Thank you for having me.
Interesting conversation for sure.
Thank you all for being here. Any last thoughts, or should I proceed with where can you all be found?
Well, you can find me at
No.
brandyburrowastrology.com and Brandy Burrow Astrology on social media, where I do readings for advice and astrology consults as well.
And I am Mac Jagger Tarot, macjaggertarot.com, and Mac Jagger Tarot on Instagram. It's the only social media I really maintain. But yeah, that's where I can be found. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for being here.
And Ellie, where can we find you?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Where can you find me? Everywhere. No. You can find me on my website at saturnseason.com. I'm on Instagram at Saturn Season Astrology, and here on YouTube at Saturn Season Astrology.
I can be on YouTube in the near future, but I'm currently I've got a podcast in development that I'm going to be having on YouTube, but I'm not there yet. But eventually one day you'll find me there.
One day.
One of these
It's an undertaking.
I believe it. I definitely commend you both for the work you do, because I think it's also interesting. I'm a big fan of your videos, so I'm really honored to be a part of it.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And thank you for wanting to be a part of it. And thanks for presenting the subject.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, this is really fun to dig into. Thank you for sharing your insights and letting me have an excuse to finally dust this thing off the shelf. I've had this for years and I don't even know where it came from, but I was just like, you know what? I do have this book we could delve into. So fun little,
I kind of want it
fun
myself.
little. Yeah, I mean, I I'm sure it's probably readily available for just a few bucks. I think I got it at like a thrift store, so it's out
I was
there.
gonna say that looks like an old copy.
It's worth it. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's probably out of print. Just because, who's clamoring to their local Barnes and Noble for Joan Quigley content, but I'm sure there's like probably many circulating vintage copies. Yeah, I think she's an interesting figure in our milieu. She's definitely somebody who I don't think I'd have a ton in common with. She seems like kind of an asshole, but
you should get with her and talk politics.
Yeah, Joan, what the fuck were you doing, girl? I'm gonna her from the grave and be like, bitch, I got some issues with you.
Bitch, I got issues. Got issues. I take issue with you.
Watch me get haunted by Joan Quigley now.
What'd you say about me?
Well, I guess we'll go ahead and take off. But again, thank you all for being here. And everyone else, I'll see y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.